Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of News for Normies, where I give you a week's worth of news in a relatively short time frame. If you enjoy this kind of work, because it can be a little demanding to listen to hours and hours upon a podcast trying to figure out what's going on. Let me know your comments down below. Share with some normies in your life because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on this past week. So, with that being said, we'll get right into it. So, yesterday, Congressman Warren Davidson held a meet and greet here at the Republican headquarters here in Butler County, Ohio, where I live. And the main topic of discussion last night was the big, beautiful bill, to which Davidson still seems like he's going to vote no on once it comes back out of the Senate. Mostly because of all of the additional spending that is in the bill. While I understand that concern, I'm also curious as to why this bill can't be passed and then immediately follow-up bills pushed to cut that spending. People also asked about the Doge cuts and stuff like that, but in my opinion, no real substantive answers were given. So it doesn't seem like he's going to be voting on this when it comes back. Also, when I asked about the provisions in the bill about the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act, Congressman Davidson didn't really elaborate on those that much. So, while it seems like he's still going to vote no on the big, beautiful bill, I do appreciate my congressman coming back to his district and having a meet and greet with the constituents here that have voted for him for over a decade now. You don't really get that from a lot of politicians. So even though I agree with the concerns on the spending, I also would like to see some of that other stuff passed. So this is a weird one, you know. So we'll see where this goes. Vice President J.D. Vance joined the social media app Blue Sky recently and was immediately suspended after making a post criticizing gender affirming care for children. If you don't know what Blue Sky is, it's essentially Twitter or X now for lefties, and I have heard that it is full of pedophiles. So that's why I'm not there. Plus, I'm also on a ton of social media as is. I don't need any more. Let me break this out here real quick, just for a quick second. I do find it kind of funny that a guy that is a very devout Catholic would join a social media site full of pedophiles. Not saying he is, but the Catholic Church has had a long history of it, so just a little weird in my opinion. Okay. On this topic of gender affirming care, the Supreme Court has upheld a Tennessee law that bans gender affirming care for children. So good for them on wanting to protect children with this ruling. Dan Caldwell, who was a top advisor to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, was placed on administrative leave in mid-April of this year amid an investigation into leaking information out of the Pentagon. So, don't know how this slipped through the cracks, but it did. Good on them for getting rid of somebody who's probably leaking stuff, and we'll see where that goes too. But doubt we'll get any more information on it as this happened months ago. Excuse me. This message still rings true. Get that from the Drinking Bros podcast store. I'm not affiliated with them, but I agree with that sentiment on that cup. So this next story, this happened last week, like right after I recorded this video, hence why I didn't talk about it last week. But two Minnesota state lawmakers were gunned down in their home on June 14th by a man impersonating a police officer. This man's name was Vance Bolter, or Belter, I think is how you pronounce it. Anyway, don't care. He was arrested for allegedly shooting the two politicians after a major manhunt was conducted in the state. From what I heard, it was the largest one that the state had ever conducted. Belter apparently had a decommissioned police car with several No Kings flyers in the front seat, and he allegedly had a list of other people he wanted to go after. Belter's wife was also pulled over roughly 90 miles away and had passports along with a sizable amount of cash on hand when she was stopped. Now, when this happened, immediately people were like, oh, he's a left-wing crazy. Oh, he's a right-wing crazy, because I guess he had been appointed to some state thing by, the governor there. But also he had his roommate, weird, had said that he had unfavorable opinions on Jim Biden. Okay. So it's kind of hard to pin this guy down. Regardless, he was allegedly the shooter of these two lawmakers, and is facing pretty serious charges for doing so. But speaking of those No Kings protests, one person by the name of Arthur Falasa Alu was killed in Salt Lake City, Utah during a No Kings protest after two peacekeepers from a group calling themselves 50501 shot at an alleged Antifa member, but hit somebody else in the altercation. Police then arrested the Antifa guy after he was shot at, instead of the guys that actually pulled the triggers. Don't know why they didn't arrest the two guys that killed an innocent bystander, but okay. But this is exactly why I tell people to stay away from these Democrat protests, because we've seen that they tend to go a little haywire. And speaking of lefties not having any common sense, New York City mayoral candidate Brad Lander was arrested by ICE after he tried to prevent them from detaining an illegal alien. So it seems like this is the latest way for politicians to make a name for themselves and get media coverage without having to pay for it, is by pulling stunts like this. And again, this just shows you where the Democrat parties lie, where their priorities lie, forgive me, because it seems like they always care about everybody else instead of you. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem was sent to the hospital earlier this week after suffering an allergic reaction to something, but by this point she's been released from the hospital and seems to be doing well. It is unclear as to what triggered this allergic reaction, but just a day or two before, she had been at a biohazard lab at Fort Detrick, Maryland, with RFK Jr. and Senator Rand Paul. Now, of course, media outlets are saying this has no correlation to the allergic reaction, but the timing is definitely weird. I'm not saying that either RFK Jr. or Senator Rand Paul had anything to do with it either, by the way, so just clearing that up. Tensions are escalating between Israel and Iran, with missile strikes ramping up amongst the two nations. The United States has mobilized several naval vessels and their strike groups to the region, including the USS Nimitz, and President Trump has issued a warning to the people of Tehran to evacuate. Now, that happened earlier this week, so I'd imagine all the people that are trying to get out of there have. President Trump has also kind of authorized military strikes in Iran, but hasn't really given a final order yet either. He being President Trump, is set to bring Iranian officials to the White House to try to negotiate some sort of a deal without engaging in an all-out war. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this nuclear facility in Iran that Israel wants completely destroyed, but President Trump has backed off of a plan to destroy this nuclear facility, the Fordo nuclear facility, as it is deep inside of a mountain. From what I understand, the best way to do this without going with a ground invasion is to use a bunker buster type bomb, followed up by a tactical nuke, which President Trump definitely does not want to do, because that would just set an unholy precedent on the world stage at this point. So other than that, a ground invasion would have to happen, and nobody wants that either. As you know, I recently learned the population of Iran is 92 million people, and it is a very mountainous country, especially where this nuclear facility is. So, don't know what's going to happen here. Hopefully, a peaceful resolution can come out of all of this. But the government of Iran is very extremist in the Islamic sense, and Iran has been saying for a long time, death to Israel, death to America, all this crazy shit. So, like at this point, just level Tehran. I'm just done with the Islamic extremism on the world stage. Like it's been a problem for the better part of the last century. Like even Reagan was dealing with this kind of stuff with like coming right into office and the whole Iranian hostages and all that crap. So who knows? We'll see what happens. I'll definitely be paying attention to this, but it's interesting that you're using the USS Nimitz in this case because the USS Nimitz was scheduled to be decommissioned next year, as it is a very old naval vessel. So it wouldn't shock me if something happened to the Nimitz that would give a reason to go to war with Iran, just like the Gulf of Tonkin incident that got us into Vietnam. See what I'm saying? Real weird. Now, I know the U.S. only has so many naval vessels and, got to work with what's on hand. But again, the timing is very, very interesting here on this one. Okay. Excuse me. Got a tickle in my throat here. So, on this topic of Iran and the tensions going on there, Tucker Carlson recently had a conversation with Ted Cruz about all of this going on. And that podcast episode was unbearable, to say the least. While Carlson did try to use gotcha type questions at certain times, Ted Cruz came off very emotional and nearly unhinged the entire time. So, for all of you watching, I would imagine you probably have seen this episode. If not, please maybe pour yourself a drink and then try to get through it. But if you're in Texas watching this, please watch that episode and vote this guy out next time. Because Ted Cruz even said in this podcast that when he first ran for Senate, his explicit goal was to be the biggest arbiter for Israel. So why is an American politician going into federal level politics saying he's going to advocate for another country? And I've used this same argument for other people like Ilhan Omar, who has been explicitly pro-Somalia, even though she's now an American. See what I'm saying? I'm tired of politicians always having the backs of every other country on earth except ours. It just drives me bonkers. So during all of this going on in Iran, China sent 3 mysterious planes over Iran for reasons that are unclear at this time. And some are speculating that they may have been used to evacuate top government personnel, but they could also be delivering weapons to the Iranian military too, or maybe both. I don't know. It's just weird that during a time where military conflict is arising and no planes are flying over the country, no commercial planes are flying over the country, 3 planes from China went in. Weird. And finally, when asked about the situation in the Middle East, Governor Tampon Tim said that China is the neutral authority and should negotiate peace between Iran and Israel. This doesn't surprise me that a communist, Tim Walz, in America supports the Chinese Communist Party. And don't forget that Governor Tampon Tim Walz spent a lot of time in China teaching English and dated the daughter of a CCP official while he was there. It's very reminiscent of Bernie Sanders having his honeymoon in the USSR when he first got married. So, that's all I've got this week, everybody. Kind of short, sweet, to the point. I've got references at the bottom here in the episode description. I'll also have all my social medias on there if you want to follow me. I've been a little off of X this week, been busy at work with my day job, so but I would appreciate all of the follows, all of the support, and like I said, if you've got normies in your life that just don't pay attention to news, this would probably be a good one to let them know about, because, you know, if they have a job and they pay taxes, their tax money is going to fund both sides of this war. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. Take care. God bless. I'll see you all next time.